The whiskey glass hit the marble floor before Charles Cole even registered that his hand had moved. The room stopped. 300 guests in cocktail attire turned toward the sound, the sharp crack of crystal on marble carrying clean over the jazz quartet, over the murmur of conversations about endowments and mergers and the view of the Chicago skyline from 40 floors up. The music stuttered. Someone gasped. And in the stretched silence that followed, every person in the Pinnacle Club's grand ballroom watched a man they respected turn into someone they didn't know. "Don't!" His voice was low. Controlled. That was the frightening part. How controlled it was. Across the room, Chairman Shin Jae-won straightened slowly from Sophie Bennett's cheek, his expression carrying the unbothered patience of a man who had been the most powerful person in every room he'd entered for 30 years. He was 63 years old, worth $4 billion, and regarded the rage aimed at him from across the ballroom the way a mountain regards weather. Charles. His wife, Soo-yeon, said his name the way she said most things, precisely, with just enough force to carry the full weight of its meaning. She was standing right beside him, her hand already moving to his forearm, her champagne glass held steady in the other hand. She had seen everything. She missed nothing. Sophie Bennett stood 10 feet from Chairman Shin in a wine-red wrap dress, her natural hair pinned into an updo that had taken 45 minutes and was absolutely worth it, her hands now crossed at her waist in the careful posture of a woman holding herself together in public while privately calculating how quickly a situation she had nothing to do with had become a situation that was very much about her. "Charles." Her voice was quiet too. "He's been my godfather since I was 7 years old. My dad and him were college roommates at Howard. He greets me this way every single time he sees me. Every single time." Charles wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Chairman Shin. Chairman Shin raised both hands, the gesture of a man who has no reason to rush. "Sophie's father and I have been brothers since 1981. I held her at the hospital the day she was born. I walked her to her first day of kindergarten when her father was traveling." His eyes moved to Charles. Not hostile. Just measuring. "I believe you were not in the picture at that time." The room exhaled. The jazz quartet found their footing again. Conversations resumed in careful, lowered voices. A server materialized with a hand broom for the glass. Soo-yeon Cole pressed 2 fingers against her husband's wrist, not dramatically, not as a performance for the room. A private signal between them, 2 years of marriage compressed into a touch. "We need some air," she said in Korean. "I'm fine," he said in English. She switched to English too, because this was not a moment for the privacy of a shared language. "I didn't say you weren't. I said we need some air, Charles." He went with her. He went because he was a man who understood what rooms like this one cost, the networking, the investors, the board members from 3 different companies who were watching him right now and would remember this moment the next time his name came up in a meeting. He was the founder of Cole Digital, a creative tech firm with 120 employees and a valuation that had taken 8 years of his life to build. He could not be the man who lost it in a ballroom over a woman he had ended things with 22 months ago. But at the door to the terrace, he turned back. Just once. Sophie was already looking at him. That moment, no words, just the full inventory of 2 people who had loved each other and then hadn't, or had and then pretended not to, was caught by 4 people in that room. Soo-yeon, who saw it from 6 feet ahead and filed it carefully. Chairman Shin, who saw it and understood exactly what it meant. Sophie's best friend Keisha, who had been watching from the bar and immediately texted 3 people. And a lifestyle blogger named Taylor who wrote for a Chicago culture site and had just found the lead for her Friday column. The night had barely started. The terrace was cold for October. Chicago wind off the lake, indifferent and direct. Soo-yeon didn't mind. She had grown up in Minnesota. Cold was honest. She set her champagne on the stone railing and looked out at the city, the lake black and vast beyond the skyline, the grid of lights running south toward Hyde Park, everything bright and indifferent and very far below. She had a talent for perspective. She had needed it often. Charles stood beside her. Not close. Her name is Sophie Bennett, Soo-Yun said. She's a landscape architect. She grew up in Atlanta, studied at Spelman, got her graduate degree at Penn. She started her firm 3 years ago. You dated for about a year and a half. She paused. It ended because you decided it wasn't going where you needed it to go. She didn't agree. You haven't mentioned her name to me once in 2 years of being together. She turned to look at him. I found out from your cousin Darnell at our engagement brunch. He thought I already knew. Charles said nothing. I made a choice not to make it a thing, Soo-Yun continued. People have histories. I'm not interested in cataloging yours. I made a decision to trust you, and I've kept it. She held his gaze. What I need to know right now, tonight, on this terrace, is whether that trust was correctly placed. He had a face that magazine profiles called intense, which was the word people used when they meant a black man's focus made them feel something they didn't want to examine. Right now his face was doing something Soo-Yun had not seen in 2 years. It was deciding. There's nothing to tell, he said. That's interesting, because the way you moved across that room told me something different. I was caught off guard. That's all. I didn't know she'd be here. You said her name before you said mine. I didn't. He stopped, because he had. He had said, don't, and then under his breath, quiet enough that only Soo-Yun had heard it, her name. Sophie. Soo-Yun was the daughter of Korean immigrants who had run a dry cleaning shop in St. Paul for 25 years. She had grown up between cultures, never quite American enough for one room, never quite Korean enough for another, and she had developed, out of that in-between space, an extraordinary ability to read what people didn't say. She was a financial analyst. She worked with numbers all day, and the numbers she was best at were the ones that didn't appear on any statement. Charles. She kept her voice even. I will ask you once. Is it over? He looked at her directly. Yes. Then why are your hands still tight? He looked down. He hadn't noticed. He unclenched them. She picked up her champagne. I'm going back in. I want us to finish this evening without anything else breaking. Then I want to go home. A pause. And Charles, I need you to remember what it cost you to choose me. Don't spend it on a moment you can't take back. She walked back through the terrace doors. Charles stood alone with the lake and the cold and the particular weight of a man who had told his wife the truth. Yes, it's over, while knowing, in some place he hadn't examined in almost 2 years, that over and gone were not the same country. Inside, through the floor-to-ceiling glass, he could see Sophie laughing at something Chairman Shin had said. Her whole body in it, her head back, the way she laughed like she'd forgotten who was watching. She had always laughed like that. Like joy was too large to stay polite. He turned away. He was good at turning away. He had practiced it. Sophie had known Charles would be at this event for 11 days. She had seen Cole Digital listed as a presenting sponsor of the Chicago Seoul Creative Economy Summit, the gala dinner tied to the same venue where she had just completed the rooftop garden installation for the Pinnacle Club's permanent collection. She had been standing in the empty ballroom doing a final site check when she found his company name on the sponsor board, and she had stood very still for 30 seconds doing nothing except breathing. Then she had called Keisha and said, I need a dress that says I have fully healed, I am doing incredible, and I feel absolutely nothing when I see him. Keisha had said, so the red wrap. I said what I said. She had worn it with the confidence of a woman who had put in the work, the therapy, the journaling, the ugly cry phase, the getting up and going back to work phase, the I am genuinely okay phase that arrived quietly about 14 months in and felt less like triumph and more like a long exhale. She had rebuilt. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. Because the alternative was staying in the rubble, and she was not that woman. She had not been prepared for his wife. Not because she hadn't known. She had heard through Keisha, who had heard through Darnell that Charles was married. She knew it. She had sat with it. She had believed she had made peace with it. But knowing a thing and watching it walk into a room in a white silk blazer with its hand through his arm were two entirely different experiences, and the distance between them had caught her somewhere unguarded, a small, precise ache, like pressing a bruise you forgot you had. She had recovered in 5 seconds. She was practiced at 5-second recoveries. Uncle Jay's greeting had been exactly what it always was. He had known her father since they were 18-year-old freshmen in a Howard University dorm, two young men far from their hometowns figuring out who they were going to be. He had been at every significant event of her life. He called her Professor Bennett's girl, even though her father had been a corporate attorney, not a professor. It was a nickname from a running joke about how her father always talked like he was giving a lecture. She loved Shin Jae-won the way you love the people who knew you before you were a person, when you were just someone's daughter running through a house in 2 big socks. She had not anticipated that his kiss on her cheek would shatter a whiskey glass. Now she sat near the installation she had built, a living garden wall that ran the length of the East Terrace, black-owned plant nursery sourced, 3 varieties of native prairie grass interwoven with Korean ornamental bamboo, her signature aesthetic of 2 worlds finding their rhythm in the same soil, and gave herself the 30 seconds she always allowed for feeling the full absurdity of a situation before she moved on. He had left her. Not dramatically. Not with cruelty. He had sat across from her in a restaurant in the West Loop and used words that were reasonable and considered and hollow in the specific way that words are hollow when someone has decided the conclusion before the conversation. I don't think we want the same things. She had asked what things. He had not been able to name them. She had driven home alone and sat in her car in her parking garage for 25 minutes and then gone upstairs and been completely fine, right up until she wasn't. That had been 22 months ago. She had designed a rooftop garden. You holding up? Keisha appeared from the direction of the bar, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand, her expression carrying the specific alertness of a best friend who has been monitoring a situation from a distance. I'm good. Sophie accepted the water. I promise. You don't have to promise me. I watched you from across the room. You had your 5-second face on. It was a 5-second moment. Keisha sat beside her. They both looked at the living garden wall, the prairie grass and bamboo finding their architecture together, 2 different species becoming something new and specific to this room, this city, this building. His wife looks smart, Keisha said. She is. I looked her up last month when I saw he was sponsoring the summit. Sophie took a sip of water. Soo-Yun Cole. Ney Park. Financial analyst. Top of her class at Northwestern. She came here from Minnesota, built her career from nothing, takes no nonsense from anyone. A pause. She looked at me from across that room before the glass broke, and I thought, that woman already knows everything. Does that bother you? Sophie considered the garden wall. The prairie grass was already at full height. The bamboo would take another season. But together, right now, they were already something worth seeing. No, she said. And meant it. It means I didn't have to be the one to tell her. The headline hit on Thursday morning. Whiskey Down. Who is the mystery woman who rattled Cole Digital's founder at the Pinnacle Club Gala? Taylor's column was careful in the way that pieces without enough sourced fact are always careful, heavy on implication, light on direct claim. She described a tense and visually striking exchange when a prominent elder figure greeted a stunning guest in a signature red dress with what appeared to be a kiss of notable familiarity. She described the whiskey glass. She described the terrace exit. She devoted a full paragraph to the rooftop garden installation and its creator, Chicago-based landscape architect Sophie Bennett, whose work was commissioned for the Pinnacle Club's permanent collection and who was also in attendance at the evening's gala. She named no connection between Sophie and Charles directly. She didn't need to. The internet connected the dots in 40 minutes. It was reshared 2,000 times before 10 a.m. Charles found out from his PR director, who called while he was in the shower. He read the column at the kitchen counter in a towel. He read it twice. Soo-Yun was already at her laptop at the kitchen table, already on her second coffee, already looking at him when he looked up. "I saw it at 6, she said. "It's speculation." She connected nothing. She didn't need to. "Our names are in 3 different comment sections already." Soo-Yun set down her coffee. "Your mother has called me. My mother has called me. Darnell texted me a meme, which I will deal with separately." She looked at him evenly. "I need you to hear me right now, Charles. Not as your wife who is upset. As the person who has been protecting this marriage since Tuesday night. The story being told about us right now is being written by other people. If we don't give it our own shape, it keeps the shape they gave it. I'll put out a statement. I'm not talking about a PR statement." Her voice was precise. "I'm talking about you and me in this kitchen, deciding what is true between us before anyone else decides it for us." She folded her hands on the table. "Who is Sophie Bennett to you, Charles? Not in 2022. Right now. Today. Who is she?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Someone I cared about," he said finally. "Someone I didn't treat fairly when I left. Someone I've thought about more than I told you." He held her gaze. "Someone I am not going back to." "That part is true." Soo-Yun absorbed this. She had the ability to hold information without visibly reacting to it, a skill developed over years of reading financials in rooms full of people who wanted to see her surprised. She was not going to give this moment that. "Thank you," she said. "That is the first honest full answer you have given me in 3 days." She stood and picked up her coffee. "I need you to handle the press piece through Taylor. And I need you to understand that I've thought about her more than I told you is a conversation we are going to finish. Not today. But we are going to finish it." She went to get dressed for work. Charles stood at the counter with the column still open on his phone. His notification bar was climbing. Somewhere in the South Loop, he knew, without quite deciding to know it, that Sophie Bennett was waking up to the same column and wanting no part of any of this. He opened a new message. "Charles, I saw the piece. I want you to know I know you had nothing to do with it." He stared at it for a minute, then sent it. Her reply came 4 minutes later. "Sophie, I appreciate that. I'm sorry your wife is dealing with this. She didn't deserve the mess." He read it twice. He noticed she said, "your wife," and not "you." He noticed she made it about Soo-Yun. He filed this away in the part of himself that was always, quietly, keeping inventory. Then he put the phone down and went to get dressed, because he was a man who moved forward. It was what he did. It was what he had always done. He was only beginning to understand what it cost. Soo-Yun made sundubu jjigae, soft tofu stew, her mother's recipe, the one she only cooked when she needed the ritual of it. The slow build, the precision of the broth, the way it demanded your full attention or it went wrong. Charles smelled it from the elevator. He stood in the hallway outside their condo door for 2 full seconds before he went in. She was at the stove in her work clothes, heels still on, her hair still pulled back, moving through the recipe with the focused calm of someone who has made a decision and is simply waiting for the right moment to say it aloud. "Sit down," she said without turning. He sat. She brought the stew and rice and sat across from him and did not eat. She looked at him the way she looked at balance sheets that didn't quite reconcile, with complete attention and no anger, because anger was imprecise and imprecision was a waste of time. "I need the real answer to something," she said. "Not the answer that protects me. The actual answer." He waited. "When you ended it with Sophie, did you close it? Fully? Or did you just leave?" The condo was quiet. Their building in River North hummed with that particular urban quiet that is really just distance from the street. Charles looked at his wife. this careful, brilliant woman who had never once asked him for more than he was capable of giving, which he now understood might have been the problem. "I left," he said. "I called it closing. But I left." "Why?" A long pause. The stew steamed between them. "Because she felt things big," he said. Everything mattered to her. Every conversation, every choice, she was present in a way that felt like a lot. "I told myself I wanted something calmer. That we were incompatible. That I needed someone more." He stopped. "More manageable." Soo-yun said it flatly, without a question mark. "I wouldn't have used that word. But that's what I am." She looked at him steadily. "I don't require big feelings from you. I don't push. I give you room. I have always thought that was partnership." Something crossed her face, not hurt exactly, but the recalibration that happens when a long-held belief shifts. "I'm now asking whether you chose me or chose the absence of what scared you." "Soo-yun, I'm not accusing you." Her voice was even. "I'm trying to understand what I'm inside of. Because if this marriage is built on me being the easier choice, I need to know that. I deserve to know that." Charles set down his spoon. He looked at his wife, this woman who had walked into every room with him and never flinched, who had navigated the specific exhaustion of being a Korean-American woman in finance with a grace that looked effortless and cost everything, who had chosen him knowing the work it would require from both of them, and who was now sitting across a bowl of her mother's recipe asking him to be honest when he barely knew how to be honest with himself. "You were not the easier choice," he said. "You were the right one. I believe that." He paused. "I also think I didn't finish things properly before I got here. And I've been carrying that quietly, and I shouldn't have." "No," she agreed. "You shouldn't have." She picked up her spoon. "Eat. We'll talk more after." They ate. The sundubu jjigae was perfect, the way things her mother taught her always were. And they both sat in the steam of it knowing that "you were the right choice" and "I feel nothing for her" were two entirely different statements, and only one of them had been made. Shin Jae-won called Charles on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the gala. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "No preamble. What you saw was exactly what Sophie told you it was. I have known that child since the day she came into the world. The greeting was habit and affection. But I was in a formal room with an audience and I should have been more measured. I'm telling you this directly because I don't do indirect." Charles had braced himself for defensiveness, or worse, indifference. A 63-year-old Korean billionaire calling to volunteer an explanation had not been in his range of expectations. "I appreciate that," Charles said carefully. "I also want to have a business conversation with you," Shin continued. "Separately from the apology. Cole Digital's platform architecture is exactly what I'm looking for to anchor a creative economy initiative I'm building across 3 U.S. cities. I've been watching your company for 2 years. I'd like to talk." The number he named for the investment made Charles stand up from his chair. "When?" Charles said. "Whenever you're ready to sit down without breaking anything," Shin said. Charles thought he heard amusement in it. He told Soo-yun at dinner. She set down her chopsticks. "He's Sophie's godfather. It's a business meeting." "I know." She picked the chopsticks back up. "Come home and tell me honestly what it was. That's all I'm asking." The meeting was at Shin's Chicago office, a floor of a Michigan Avenue tower that felt like it had been designed to make you aware of your own size. Shin was already seated when Charles arrived, 2 cups of barley tea on the table, the lake visible through the windows like a flat gray painting. They talked business for an hour. Shin was precise and creative and saw the edges of Charles's vision in ways that Charles himself had only half-mapped. The partnership outline was the kind of thing that appeared once in a career. Then Shin set down his tea. "Sophie is doing well," he said. "In case any part of you was wondering." Charles said nothing. She doesn't say your name anymore. I know that sounds like healing. It is. Shin looked at him without judgment. But I've known her 26 years. The things that truly stop costing her, she talks about freely. The things still in process, she goes quiet on. She's still quiet on you. Not much, but a little. A pause. I'm telling you this not to give you hope. I'm telling you because it means you left something unfinished, and unfinished things don't stay in the past. They take up space in the present. What are you telling me to do? Charles asked. I'm telling you to figure out what you actually feel, Shin said, and then to be honest about it with your wife before she figures it out herself and you lose the chance to tell her first. He lifted his tea. She seems like the kind of woman who respects honesty more than comfort. Don't give her the comfort version. Charles drove back across the city thinking about a man who had known Sophie Bennett since she was born, who had watched her father and this Korean stranger become brothers over 4 decades, who had flown to her father's funeral and wept without apology. He thought about the particular tenderness with which Shin had said, "I've known that child since the day she came into the world." He thought about what it meant to be known like that, to be held in someone's inventory from the very beginning. He thought about what he had put down when he left her, and what it meant that he had never quite put it all the way down. Sophie was in the Lincoln Park Conservatory with a moisture probe and a notebook when she heard the door. She was doing a site assessment, a potential commission for a new installation in the conservatory's east wing, something she had been working toward for 2 years. She was in her site clothes, work boots, old jeans, a Spellman sweatshirt she'd had since undergrad, her hair wrapped. She had soil under 2 fingernails and hadn't had lunch. She looked up. Charles Cole stood in the conservatory entrance, as out of place in his good coat and work shoes as a man could be in a room full of ferns and grow lights. He looked at her. She looked at him. "I had a meeting nearby," he said. "I used to come here. I forgot you. I didn't know you'd." "I work here Wednesdays," she said. "Site assessments." He didn't move from the entrance. He held the threshold. She noticed this, like he understood that crossing it would carry a meaning he hadn't decided to carry yet. The conservatory was warm and green and smelled like earth and water. Outside, November had started its Chicago argument. In here, everything was growing. "This place is how I ended up in landscape architecture," he said, looking around. "I used to cut class in high school and come sit in here, just to be somewhere that was alive." He looked at her. "I never told you that." "No," she said. "You didn't." A beat of silence, the kind that holds more than either person is saying. "I owe you an apology," he said. "A real one. Not the kind I gave you at that restaurant, which was actually a decision I'd already made dressed up as a conversation." He stayed at the threshold. "I was afraid of how much you felt, of how present you were. I told myself it was a compatibility issue. It wasn't. I was the issue. I wasn't ready to be that present back, and instead of saying that, I just left." Sophie sat back on her heels. She set down her moisture probe. She had rehearsed, in various therapy sessions and shower conversations with herself, what she would say if this moment arrived. None of the rehearsed versions had started with him telling her about cutting class in high school to come sit with the ferns. "I know," she said finally. "I worked that out about a year ago. I was furious at you for a while. Then I was just tired of spending energy on something I couldn't change." She looked at him directly. "And then I built some things I'm proud of and the fury finished." "I heard about the Pinnacle Club installation," he said. 3 different people described it to me before I walked in that night. That room was talking about your work." "Good." She said it without false modesty. She had earned that. "Are you happy, Sophie?" She considered him, this man who had once known exactly how she took her coffee, who had sat with her through her father's health scare, who had said the right things at every turn until the one turn that mattered, when he had said the wrong thing and then driven away. "Yes," she said. "I'm really, genuinely happy. I have a commission in Atlanta next spring, a community healing garden in Vine City. And I'm a finalist for the National Landscape Design Award." She almost smiled. "Are you?" 3 seconds of silence. "I'm building something worth being proud of," he said. She heard the gap between that and yes. She had heard gaps like that before. "Go finish building it," she said quietly. "Your wife, she's good, Charles. She sees everything. Give her the version of you that doesn't have anything left in storage." She picked up her moisture probe. "That's all I wanted from you anyway. I just wanted to be seen clearly before you left. Go do that for her." He stood in the conservatory doorway for a moment longer. "Thank you, Sophie." "Goodbye, Charles." She heard the door, and the hiss of November cold rushing briefly in, and then the warmth closing back around her. She pressed the probe into the east wing soil and read the moisture level and wrote the number in her notebook and went back to work, in the warm green room, among the growing things. She was not looking for it. Soo-Yun had reached across the nightstand in the dark. 6 a.m., Charles still asleep, her alarm going off on his phone because hers was charging, and the screen was unlocked when she picked it up. She saw Sophie's name. The exchange from after the gala. She saw his message and Sophie's reply about his wife not deserving the mess, and she felt something complicated and quiet at that, grateful, almost, for a woman who had thought of her in a moment she had every reason not to. Then she scrolled and saw what was below it. Dated 5 days ago. Time-stamped 2:17 p.m. on a Wednesday. "Charles, I ran into you at the conservatory. I said what I should have said 2 years ago. I hope it was worth something to you. I needed to say it. Sophie, it was. It closed something. Go home and open up to your wife the way you couldn't open up to me. She deserves that. Goodbye, Charles." Soo-Yun set the phone on the nightstand. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the city outside their bedroom window. Early gray light, the lake in the distance, Chicago assembling itself for another day. She had given Charles space on the topic of Sophie because she was not the kind of woman who demanded surveillance of a man's past. She had offered trust as a baseline, not something that had to be earned before it was extended, because that was how she believed trust worked. You gave it until you had a reason not to. What she was sitting with now was not a reason not to trust him. Sophie's message made clear that nothing had happened in that conservatory that should not have happened. The goodbye was real. The door was closed. What Soo-Yun was sitting with was the omission. 5 days. He had run into his ex-girlfriend, had what sounded like the most honest conversation of their history, and had come home to their apartment on Wednesday evening and eaten takeout with her and watched 2 episodes of a show they were in the middle of and had not said a word. Not because he was hiding something. She was fairly sure of that. But because he was, at his core, a man who processed privately and presented the clean version. He had been doing it their whole marriage. She had accommodated it because it matched her own instinct toward privacy. She was now wondering whether 2 private people in a marriage was a partnership or just a very polite arrangement. When Charles's alarm actually went off, the real one on his phone at 6:30, she was still sitting on the edge of the bed. He registered her posture before he was fully awake. He sat up. "Soo-Yun. You went to the conservatory," she said. He was still for a moment. "Yes." "You said goodbye to her." "Yes." "And you came home and didn't tell me." He was quiet for a moment. "I was going to. I didn't know how to explain why I needed to do it without making it sound like something it wasn't." "But can you see," she said carefully, "how the not telling is its own wound?" He sat on his side of the bed. He put his hands on his knees. He looked at her profile. She was still facing the window, still looking at the city, and said, "Yes, you're right. I have a habit of managing what I share with you. I tell myself I'm protecting you from things that aren't a problem. But what I'm actually doing is making decisions about what you can handle, and you've never once asked me to do that for you. She turned to look at him. I need you in therapy, she said. Not as an ultimatum, as a requirement. Not because something is broken, because something is closed that shouldn't be. And I'm not equipped to be the only person you open it with. I'll go, he said. I'll find someone this week. She looked at him for a long moment, measuring, not what he had done, but what he was willing to do. Okay, she said. She turned back to the window. Okay. It was not forgiveness. It was not the end of a hard conversation. It was, in its own specific way, the beginning of an honest one, which is the only kind that survives. Soo-yeon called Keisha on a Saturday afternoon. This required a particular kind of courage, calling your husband's ex-girlfriend's best friend to ask about the texture of feelings that had passed between them, and Soo-yeon was not a woman who avoided things that required courage. She was a woman who disliked wasting time. I want to be straightforward with you, Soo-yeon said. I'm not calling to cause anything for Sophie. I'm calling because I'm trying to understand my own marriage and I'd rather ask someone honest than keep guessing. Keisha was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was measured and not unkind. Ask. Is she over him? A pause. Not the pause of someone deciding whether to lie, but the pause of someone choosing the most accurate words. Sophie is the most self-aware person I know, Keisha said. She told me after the conservatory that something settled. Like a picture finally sitting level on the wall. A beat. She's not carrying him anymore. She hasn't been for a while. The gala just stirred something she thought was completely still. Turns out it was almost still. The conservatory finished it. I believe you, Soo-yeon said. That's actually not what worries me most. What worries you most? My husband's relationship with his own interior, Soo-yeon said. Whether he built this marriage on what he actually wanted or on what felt manageable after something that scared him. Keisha was quiet for a moment. That's a question for him, not for Sophie. I know, Soo-yeon said. I already asked him. I'm asking you because I wanted to know if Sophie saw the same man I'm seeing, someone who feels deeply and handles it by going quiet. Yeah, Keisha said simply. She saw that man. She loved that man. She just couldn't reach him. Soo-yeon sat with this. Thank you, she said. Genuinely. She called Chairman Shin next, because she had concluded that he was the most honest node in the entire situation, and honesty was what she needed. I expected you might call, he said. Then you know why I'm calling. You want to know if he's worth the work of rebuilding trust. Shin's voice was measured. I'll tell you what I know of Charles Cole. He is not a dishonest man. He is a man who was raised to be strong in a specific way, the kind of strength that doesn't show its process. It solves. It moves. It doesn't sit in the feeling because sitting in the feeling looked like weakness where he came from. A pause. That kind of man is capable of profound change. But only if someone requires it of him. His father didn't. His coaches didn't. Sophie didn't stay long enough to. He let that land. The question is whether you will. And if I do, then you get the version of him that nobody has had yet. A pause. I've been watching Charles Cole from a distance for 2 years. He built something real from nothing. That takes a specific kind of interior strength. The same capacity that built his company can build a marriage, if he stops using it only outward and starts using it inward too. Soo-yeon sat in her car in the parking garage of their building, the engine off, the city muffled outside. One more question, she said. Why do you care? Sophie is my goddaughter, Shin said. Any man who mattered to her, or who handled her carelessly, is in my interest to understand. Even after the fact. A pause. And you called me, which tells me you already trust your own judgment more than you're letting on. Stop looking for permission to believe in your marriage. That's all I have. She went upstairs. Charles was at the kitchen table. A business card face up between his hands, a therapist's card, a name she didn't recognize, a South Side address. I went on Thursday, he said. First session. I didn't tell you because I wanted to go at least once before I said anything, so I couldn't back out. He looked up. He said I've been running my emotional life like a sprint, fast enough that nothing has time to catch me. He said what's behind me is still running. Soo-Yun crossed the kitchen and sat across from him. Tell me what's behind you, she said. All of it. Start wherever you need to start. He took a breath that went all the way down, and for the first time in 2 years of marriage, he started where it actually started. Not with Sophie, not with a gala, but with a boy in Englewood who learned that the only safe feeling was forward motion and had been running ever since. 5 months later, Sophie Bennett stood in the middle of a Vine City lot in Atlanta and watched a community healing garden take its first real breath. 6 months of planning. 3 months of building. 47 volunteers on the final planting day, most of them from the neighborhood, most of them showing up not because someone asked them to, but because the project had become something they felt personally, a green thing in a place that had been told for decades it didn't deserve green things. Native Georgia plants. A water feature fed by a rain collection system. Seating areas designed in the circular tradition that Sophie had researched in collaboration with the neighborhood's elder council. At the center, a single magnolia tree that had been growing in a pot in her studio for 2 years, waiting for the right ground. Today the magnolia went in. She stood back and watched it happen and felt, in her chest, the specific satisfaction of work that had found its right place in the world. Uncle Jay had sent flowers to her studio that morning, a Korean flower arrangement with a small card that read, "Your father planted things too. In people. I see it in everything you build." She had put the card in her sight notebook and carried it all day. She thought about Charles sometimes. The thoughts were short and uncomplicated and arrived less frequently every month. She thought, I hope he went to therapy. I hope Soo-Yun got the whole man. I hope he stopped running long enough to find out what he was running from. She hoped this with genuine warmth and no residue. That was how she knew it was finished. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the magnolia in its new ground, the Atlanta sky blue behind it, the neighborhood visible in the background, the houses, the people, the street that was becoming something different from what it had been. She sent it to Keisha with no caption. Keisha replied 3 seconds later, "That's your tree, Sophie. That's your tree." She laughed, fully, loudly, with her whole body, and went back to work. In Chicago, Charles Cole sat across from his therapist on a Wednesday afternoon and talked about his grandfather. This was the thing no one had told him about therapy, that the root was never where you thought it was. He had gone in expecting to talk about Sophie, about Soo-Yun, about the gala and the glass and the article. His therapist had listened to all of that and then said, "Tell me about the first time you remember deciding not to show someone how you felt." And Charles had opened his mouth to answer, and instead of the name he expected, out came his grandfather, a man from the South Side who had survived things Charles still didn't have full language for, who had built a life through pure forward motion, who had never once in Charles's presence admitted to fear, grief, doubt, or need. "I wanted to be like him," Charles said. "He seemed untouchable. I didn't understand until I was grown that untouchable isn't the same as unharmed." "What's the difference?" his therapist asked. "Untouchable means nothing gets in," Charles said. "Unharmed means what got in didn't break you." A pause. "My grandfather was untouchable. I think he was never unharmed. I think I inherited the wall without the wounds it was built for." His therapist wrote something, then looked up. "So what would it mean to take the wall down?" Charles thought about this for a long time. It would mean Su-Yun would see everything, he said finally. Not just the parts I've curated for her. Is that frightening? Yes. Is it worth being frightened? He thought about his wife sitting across a bowl of sundubu jjigae asking for the actual answer. He thought about her on the edge of the bed at 6 a.m., facing the lake, still there. He thought about the morning after the conservatory, when she had said okay, not as acceptance of what he'd done, but as the decision to stay in the room and keep going. He thought about Chairman Shin saying, "The same capacity that built his company can build a marriage." "Yes," he said. "It is." He came home that evening to find Su-Yun in their living room with her laptop and a cup of oolong, the lake dark and wide through their window. She looked up when he came in. "Good session?" she asked. "I talked about my grandfather." He set down his bag. "It's going to be a long road." "Long roads are the ones worth walking," she said. She moved over on the couch. He sat beside her, close this time. "I want to tell you something," he said. "I've been rehearsing it and I've decided the rehearsing is the problem, so I'm going to say it without the edit." He turned to look at her. "I chose you knowing I had unfinished business I hadn't examined. I told myself it didn't matter because it was in the past. That was unfair to you. You deserved the version of me that had done the work. I'm doing the work now and I can't give you the time back, but I can give you the rest of it, the actual rest of it, not the managed version." He held her gaze. "That's what I want to offer you. If you want it." Su-Yun looked at her husband for a long moment. "Charles." She set down her oolong. "I came to this country for college with 2 suitcases and nobody who knew my name. I built everything I have in rooms where I was the only person who looked like me. I have never once in my life taken the easy version of anything." She held his gaze. "I did not marry you because you were simple. I married you because I could see who you were capable of being." A pause. "Show me that person. I've been waiting." He reached over and took her hand. She let him. Chairman Shin Jae-won heard about the Cole's renewed foundation through Charles, who called him directly, a call that lasted 12 minutes and that Shin would later describe to a mutual colleague as the most honest phone call I have received from a man under 40 in recent memory. He sent a message after. "Shin, I told you honesty was more efficient than management. Charles, you could have just said that at the gala instead of letting me break a glass. Shin, I could have. But you wouldn't have been ready to hear it. A man has to shatter something before he understands what he's been holding too tight." Charles sat with this for a moment, then typed, "Charles, thank you. For Sophie. For the business. For the barley tea. Shin, the barley tea was just barley tea. The rest was you. Now go home." The real story was never the glass on the marble floor. It was never the column or the terrace or the locked gaze across the ballroom. Those were the visible parts, the evidence of a man who had been carrying something too long, in a body that eventually said, "Enough." The real story was a black man from Englewood sitting in a therapist's office in the South Loop, finally learning the difference between forward motion and healing. It was a Korean-American woman from Minnesota who had been steady enough for 2 people because she thought steadiness was love, discovering that she was allowed to need something too. It was a woman in Atlanta watching her magnolia tree go into the ground, full and unbothered and done. And it was a billionaire Korean godfather who had been a college kid's best friend 40 years ago in a Howard dorm, who carried that friendship like a sacred object across every decade since, who showed up, unbothered, prescient, infuriatingly right, and asked the questions no one else thought to ask. None of this trends. None of it photographs clean. But it's what lasts. It's what people describe, 20 years later, when someone asks how they made it through. They chose each other. Every day. Not instead of everything else, but through it. Past it. Because of what it cost and what survived the paying. That's the only love story that counts.